I awoke one morning when I was 5 years old to the sound of my front door being barricaded in by the police. And I remember very vividly that they rushed into my house. They took my parents and my two uncles into custody, down the stairs in handcuffs, and they started to grab bags of white powder from everywhere I can imagine and remember. And to distract me, I remember a police officer came over to me and he handed me a kitten. And I stopped paying attention to my childhood that was crumbling around me, and I started focusing on this innocent animal. And I was gifted with two thoughts that particular day. One was I destined to fall into the footsteps of my drug dealing family? And the second was, would I ever have a choice to choose out of this? And those are two heavy thoughts for a 5-year-old to take in. And I remember that story as I started to dwell on the theme for today, which is integrity. And I think you can ask a lot of people what integrity is, and you'll get a similar answer. A lot of people will say it's doing the right thing when nobody's looking. I think if you Google integrity for core values for corporations, you're going to find hundreds of thousands of companies who throw up the word integrity as their core value. And I don't know if it necessarily means that the company has integrity just because it throws up the word as their core value. As a matter of fact, that concept of doing the right thing when no one's looking, if that's integrity, well, then you have to face the reality that there was a company who used integrity as their core value called Enron. And Enron was literally a company who was not doing the right thing when people were looking or weren't looking. So I think that is a good definition of integrity, but I want to get to what the literal breakdown of the word means in order to understand the constructivist view of what integrity is. And so integrity, the word means of the whole. Of the whole. And I think, when we watch these superhero movies, these powerful superheroes that shoot lasers out of their eyes, that can disintegrate things, right? And that's where the word comes from. Integrity is integrating things back. It's making it whole, not disintegrating something. And I thought of that childhood memory because that was a memory of when I became disintegrated. And I would spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how to gain integrity once again to become whole. Most importantly, though, if we're going to talk about integrity, we have to realize that it is something that you can't wake up tomorrow and have more of. And I wish it was that way. I wish we can just wake up and say, you know what, I think I'm going to build integrity tomorrow. I'm going to wake up and I will just have more of it. That's not how integrity works. There's a process. And it very much starts with the ideas that I was facing as a 5-year-old. I was gifted two particular thoughts in the most horrific moment in my childhood. Thoughts. That, I believe, is the beginning of integrity. It's the way that we think. And I'm going to give you a great quote that I think if we understand it, we will begin to understand integrity as a whole. And particularly from a constructivist view of integrity, we want to look at it and teach it and learn it and apply meaning to it, because it is a word that is meaningless if you use it as a core value, but everybody in your company is not doing what they should do, they're not acting with integrity. Well, then there's no meaning to the word. There's no meaning to understand what we want to gain out of it. But so I want to give you a better way to look at integrity. And it's from a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. And this is what Emerson says: "Watch your thoughts, for they become your words. Watch your words, for they become your actions. Watch your actions, for they become your habits. Watch your habits, for they become your character." Your character, that's where your integrity lives. And watch your character, because that is your destiny. And integrity is locked away in our character of who we are. But notice that if I wanted to get to my character to build integrity, I have to start looking back down Emerson's quote. So if I want to break open my character to become a person of more integrity, become more whole, well, then I have to look at my habits. What are the habits that I have? Are they positive or are they negative? Are they impacting my character in a meaningful way, or are they just another barrier to my character? But to understand habits, I have to first understand my actions. What are the things I do every single day on repeat? Are those things positive and healthy, or are they negative? Are they things that I do that probably are not making it the best version of myself? But if I want to look at my actions, I have to look at my words and the way I communicate. And that goes with my nonverbal cues and my body language. Speak to people. Am I generous? Am I helpful? Am I giving? Or am I cold and reserved? But the most important part of Emerson's quote, all of this is impacted directly by the first thing he says. He says, watch your thoughts. And it's funny that Emerson brings it down to the way that we think, because our thoughts have a direct impact on our character and our destiny. And we mentioned that integrity is part of our character. It's part of what makes us whole. Our character is who we are. It's our essence, our individuality. And ultimately, it's the part of us that is whole and integrated. But there are circumstances within our lives that will begin to disintegrate us. And I'll be honest, a lot of it starts with how we think about ourselves, and also about how and what has been implanted into our own thoughts. And sometimes it's from the people around us, our friends and our family. Sometimes it's from social media, how much news we consume. Sometimes it's from the movies we watch and the music we listen to and the podcasts that we listen to in our cars. All of those things are competing for your thoughts. And the question is, do you have control of those thoughts? Because if you don't, it will have a significant impact on whether or not you're actually whole, whether you're actually integrated. Because if a company ever wants to say that integrity is its core value, well, the question that should naturally derive from that is, how do the employees in that company think? And what messages do we give to those employees to be free thinkers and to become fully integrated with themselves? What are your thoughts? Author Sean Acor, who wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage, talked about how at Harvard University, where he went and where he worked, he saw a lot of students come into Harvard, and because of negative thought patterns, they would go down this path of either depression, and sadly, in some cases, it would lead to students committing suicide. And he said that a lot of that came from being these big fish in small ponds and having these really, really difficult expectations and negative thinking about what they were able to accomplish in a competitive college and university as Harvard. But he mentioned that if you change the way that you think, and which is what he started promoting in positive psychology at Harvard, there is a greater chance that if you started your day on something that was positive, doing something positive, implanting a positive thought, that the trajectory of your day will be naturally more optimistic. Your brain will choose to make positive connections over negative connections. And that's extremely meaningful to the power of the way that we think. And how do we look at integrity then from that lens? How do we place meaning on integrity from the way that we think? In 2008, I was working at a public storage. And for those of you who don't know, public storage is a company that collects people's goods and puts it in storage for them and gives them a place to keep their things. And in 2008, particularly, we were going through the housing crisis in the United States. And I saw a lot of people as I was working there lose their homes. And sometimes it was just kids going off to college, but a lot of the people I saw were people losing their homes and had to put all of their stuff in storage. And I'll never forget an encounter I had with a man named Alan. Alan had to put all of his mother's belongings into a huge 10 by 30 outdoor non-climate controlled unit because not only did his mother lose her home in the crisis, but she was diagnosed with cancer. And after he brought everything in, Alan would ride his bicycle to my job every single month to drop off the check, which was close to $900 a month to store at this facility. And about 6 months later, Alan didn't come one month to drop off his payment. And in those companies, if you don't come by the seventh day, they cut your lock off, they open the unit and they look inside and they tag, they record what they can see and they seal the unit with a tag and they put their own lock on it. And you have to pay the whole fee for the month plus the late fee of $75. And if you didn't pay after the second month, it was another month's rent, another fee, and then they start the process of auction. And if you've ever seen the show Storage Wars, it's pretty much the same thing that happens in real life. That if you don't pay after 3 months, your stuff is sold in a public auction at these storage spaces. Well, the day before Alan's unit was to be sold in auction, he came to the store riding his bicycle. And he walked in and he told me, Frank, look, I realize you've been trying to call me and I have not been able to get to you. My mother's cancer took a turn for the worst and I don't have the $3,000 to pay off this unit, but I do need to get into the unit to get her social security card and to get some family photos. Now, when he told me that, I knew what would happen. I knew that they were going to come in and they would just toss stuff out if they couldn't sell it. And so I made a decision that I would break the seal and allow Alan in to get his mother's social security card and find some pictures. And so I did that. And I remember him letting him into the unit and he thanked me and he went in looking for his stuff. And I walked back and I had a thought that wouldn't stop bothering me. It was telling me that something was wrong with Alan and I needed to go out there. I needed to be with him. And I tried to brush that thought off for like a half an hour. I went back to my office. I was doing some work, but the thought got bigger and bigger and louder in my head. Alan is not okay. Go talk to him. So I decided that, all right, maybe I should just go out there and check on him. So I closed my front door and it was fortunately one of those days where my entire property was dead. There was nobody there moving in or out. And it was just myself and Alan. And so when I got to his unit, I looked inside and he had tons of stuff there piled up and he was somewhere squeezed in the back. And so I just kind of knocked on his unit and I went, "Hey, Alan." No response. So I just knocked a little louder. I went, "Hey, Alan." And I remember he shot his head up after he was just sitting down on a box and he looked at me and there was something about the way that he gazed right into my eyes and what came out of me from thoughts to words was, "Do you want to pray for your mom?" And I remember thinking, oh no, please pull that back in, pull that back in. But it was too late because Alan got up and he actually said yes. And this man walked over to me and he grabbed my hands. And I remember freaking out thinking, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? Am I going to lose my job? What's happening here? And he was expecting me to say something. So I just said the first thing that I could say. I said, "Dear God, thank you for Alan's mom." And at that moment, Alan began to cry. And he began to cry deeper than I'd ever seen anybody cry in my entire life. And he hugged me, and he was embracing me, and his tears were all over my shirt. I remember looking at my shirt, it was drenched in Alan's tears. And honestly, 5 minutes, Alan was holding on and crying into my arms. And when he let go, he looked at me with this renewed face, and he said something that I'll never forget to this day. He said, "Frank, I am 50 years old, and nobody in my entire life has ever shown me the amount of love that you just showed me." I remember walking away from that experience thinking this was really, really cathartic. What does it mean? What was the purpose of this? And it took me many years later to realize what actually happened. I was handing Alan a kitten like was handed to me in one of the worst moments of my life. You see, thoughts are extremely powerful, and thoughts lead to words, to actions, to habits, and ultimately your character. And your character is where integrity lives. And in that moment of me handing Alan this metaphorical kitten, my integrity was stretching back and coming back together from all of those years of being disintegrated. You see, because integrity in essence, while it's about the whole, you don't necessarily have to be whole in order to help fill others. Because the paradox is, the more you give of yourself to help fill others, the more integrated you actually become. And in essence, I think that's exactly what integrity is all about. Thank you.